The submitted text is a short biographical script detailing the emotional fallout and professional betrayal between Hilary Duff and her sister Haylie, culminating a decade later in Hilary's song, We Don't Talk. So, a key theme running through this material seems to be the sudden shift from absolute trust to total betrayal. Let's look closely at the section discussing the timeline of events.
Yeah, the timeline is, well, it's a bit complicated.
It really is, because we get this incredibly vivid picture of immense generosity right at the start.
Right.
You know, we have them sharing a home, we see the facilitation of these stage duets, they're getting lead movie roles, and Hilary is granting full access to her core career team.
Which is just a massive structural merging of two lives. I mean, they are completely intertwined.
Exactly. And then, without any warning at all, we are instantly dropped into the discovery of a catastrophic betrayal during her pregnancy.
Yeah.
It feels like stretching a rubber band as far as it can go, and then it just instantly snaps without us hearing it fray first.
That's clearly laid out. I wonder, though, if we've considered how the audience processes that snap when they haven't been prepared for it at all. The narrative pacing compresses years of complex relationship dynamics into a sudden, jarring shift that weakens the emotional impact of the betrayal.
It's just too abrupt.
It really is. The script transitions immediately from Hilary giving Haylie everything without reservation. I mean, just total trust, straight into the climax of discovering private chats and cheating scandals.
Right.
And because there is no transitional phase, like no buildup of tension between sharing a luxury mansion as top stars and the ultimate betrayal, the timeline just feels confusing.
Yeah, it creates a sort of narrative whiplash.
Exactly. The rift feels abrupt rather than earned.
It's kind of like walking down a staircase in the dark and expecting one more step that isn't there. You need the reader's brain to be anticipating the drop so the jolt actually registers as emotional devastation, rather than just narrative confusion.
Right. You want them to feel the heartbreak, not confusion about the timeline.
Right. But I do have to push back a little here.
Okay.
When you are constructing a narrative based on real human life, especially in a high-stakes environment like Hollywood, things often do happen abruptly.
Sure, they do.
So if this blindside was genuinely sudden in real life, why manufacture tension? Like, aren't we asking the writer to artificially inflate the drama if we force a transition that might not have actually existed?
Well, that's a completely fair question. And I think it speaks to the difference between, chronological reality and narrative pacing.
Okay.
Even if the discovery of the betrayer was a total blindside in reality, human relationships, especially deeply enmeshed ones like sisters sharing a business, they always possess underlying stress points.
That's true. There's always some friction.
Always. And when a writer skips straight over those stress points to get to the explosive climax, the piece stops feeling like a true story and it starts feeling like a Wikipedia summary.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Because the audience is left experiencing an abrupt plot point rather than a devastating human reality. You don't need to manufacture drama at all. You just need to restructure the middle section to build narrative tension by introducing a transitional phase that hints at the growing friction before the ultimate climax of the discovery.
I see what you're going for here. Let's see how we can strengthen this practically, because a lot of writers do struggle with this exact mechanism. How do you structurally hint at that friction without giving away the ending too soon?
It really comes down to contextualizing the environment. So, for example, you could insert a brief bridge sentence acknowledging the passage of time, or just the inherent pressure of sharing a core career team in Hollywood.
Right, just grounding it a bit.
Exactly. You might introduce a line simply stating that the weight of sharing a single business apparatus under the relentless scrutiny of the industry slowly began to strain the foundation of their shared home.
I like that. It's subtle.
Very subtle. Or, alternatively, you can contrast the specific generosity with a subtle hint of unease.
How would that look?
Well, when mentioning the stage duets, instead of just listing them as a pure positive, add a half beat of hesitation. Perhaps noting how the boundaries between sisterhood and business began to blur dangerously, right before dropping the ultimate bombshell about Matthew's cheating.
Ah, right. So by putting that structural bridge in place, you're essentially training the listener's ear to anticipate the fracture.
Exactly. You're giving them the missing step.
And if we are slowing down the pacing to let the audience anticipate that missing stair, the landing needs to make complete logical sense.
It has to.
So let's look closely at the section discussing the actual discovery of the betrayal. As I understand it from the notes, The argument here is that the betrayal was multi-layered, but I'm tripping over the sheer volume of unexplained bombshells.
It is a lot to process at once.
It is. I mean, are they all necessary? Because we get a passing mention of financial records and then secret contacts with people who'd harmed her, right alongside Matthew's cheating and these fierce public social media fights.
Is there a risk that focusing solely on the volume of betrayals might overlook the clarity of the narrative? The inclusion of vague, highly dramatic claims without supporting context leaves the audience disoriented and dilutes the credibility of the narrative.
It just muddies the water.
It really does. The text drops massive, unresolved breadcrumbs. I mean, specifically mentioning Hilary discovering financial records and Haylie secretly contacting people who'd harmed her. But then it completely abandons these threads to focus on Matthew's cheating and the public fights.
Right, it just leaves them hanging.
Exactly. Introducing severe claims like financial betrayal without unpacking them frustrates the listener and clutters the narrative focus.
In editing, we often talk about the law of narrative conservation, or, narrative debt.
Yes, narrative debt is a great concept for this.
Right? If a writer introduces a loaded term like financial records in a story about sisters sharing a business team, the reader's brain instinctively opens a file for corporate espionage.
Oh yeah, they want the receipts?
They do. We expect a payoff. We want the forensic accounting. And when the narrative pivots sharply away from the money and goes solely into romantic cheating, it feels like we missed a page of the script.
Yeah, it's very jarring.
But let me challenge this again. If the financial betrayal actually happened, isn't the writer obligated to include it? Aren't we essentially asking them to whitewash history just to make the narrative flow better?
That makes sense from a purely factual standpoint. But could the evidence also support a different conclusion? Like prioritizing narrative coherence over an exhaustive list of grievances?
I mean, maybe.
Because storytelling, even biographical nonfiction, isn't court reporting. You have a limited amount of emotional real estate in a short script.
That's a good point.
If you introduce a financial betrayal, you incur the debt of explaining it. If you don't have the word count to explain the mechanics of how that money was weaponized, including it doesn't honor the truth. It just confuses the audience.
Right.
So you have to either remove the vague references to maintain a tight focus on the core romantic and familial betrayal, or explicitly clarify what those financial records or harmful contacts entailed to justify their inclusion in the script.
Okay, so what I really like about this part is the editorial agency it gives the writer. It forces a distinct philosophical choice about what this story is actually about.
Exactly.
So if the writer decides to commit to the financial aspect because it's, say, the true catalyst for the rift, how do they anchor that without derailing the momentum of the cheating scandal?
By tying the evidence directly to the foundational elements established in the opening.
Okay.
If you are going to keep the financial records, connect them directly back to the earlier mention of the shared core career team to demonstrate exactly how the professional trust was broken.
So you loop it back.
Yes. You could clarify that Hilary discovered financial documents proving the very career team she had shared with her sister had been actively working to undermine her assets. That immediately justifies the detail.
It pays off the setup.
Exactly. Now, alternatively, if the emotional core of the heartbreak is the romantic betrayal and the public humiliation, just streamline the paragraph.
Just cut the money stuff entirely.
Cut it. Strip out the financial mentions and the vague references to people who'd harmed her, and focus solely on Haylie exposing Matthew's cheating during Hilary's pregnancy and the resulting public fights. This alone is a strong, perfectly understandable catalyst for the rift, without needing the distraction of vague claims.
I completely agree with that second approach. I think sometimes subtracting elements from a story actually magnifies the elements that remain.
Oh, absolutely.
Losing a partner and a sister simultaneously during a pregnancy is an emotionally massive event. It really doesn't need to compete with an unexplained financial subplot impelling.
No, it stands on its own.
And I think by cutting that corporate espionage element, you leave a massive void which inevitably forces the reader to look closer at the emotional fallout that remains.
Right.
And the material actually makes a strong case for the depth of this tragedy right at the very beginning by highlighting a highly vulnerable, raw quote from Hilary.
The empty spot quote.
Yes, she calls the rift the loneliest empty spot in her life. It's just a beautiful, heartbreaking anchor for the piece. But as I read through the rest of the text, I notice the narrator's tone quickly shifts away from this empathetic reality.
That's fascinating. What if we looked at it from the perspective of aligning the narrator's voice with Hilary's actual grief? Because from my reading, the heavy reliance on sensational tabloid phrasing obscures the very real, grounded tragedy of losing a sibling.
It really distracts from the pain.
It does. Phrases like total betrayal, becoming familiar strangers, and fierce public fights, they push the script into a melodramatic, gossipy register.
Yeah, it sounds like a magazine.
Exactly. And this stylistic choice directly clashes with the raw, vulnerable tone established by Hilary's quotes and her ultimate attempt to find peaceful closure a decade later through her song. When the narrator sounds like a magazine cover, the audience struggles to feel the quiet, lonely, empty spot the subject is actually describing.
This gets into the psychology of how readers process adjectives, I think.
Oh, for sure.
When a writer uses phrases like total betrayal, they are actively dictating the emotion to the reader. But the human brain naturally resists being told how to feel.
We hate it.
We really do. It creates a dissonance. On one hand, we are being asked to witness a deeply painful human experience. On the other hand, the language feels engineered for clicks.
It feels cheap.
Right. But let me play devil's advocate for a second.
Go for it.
Losing your sister, your career foundation, and your partner all at once? I mean, how do you describe a situation that explosive without sounding dramatic? The betrayal was massive. Doesn't the language need to match the scale of the event?
Building on that point, what if we looked at it from the perspective of emotional economy?
Okay, emotional economy.
Yeah. When you are dealing with a betrayal of this magnitude, the volume is already at a 10. The facts themselves are explosive.
Right.
So when the narrator attempts to match that explosion with dramatic clichés, it actually overwrites the emotion.
It's too much noise.
It's way too much. The audience doesn't need the narrator to amplify the drama. They need the narrator to guide them through the wreckage. You need to align the narrator's voice more closely with Hilary's stated vulnerability by using understated, precise language rather than clichés, allowing the stark facts of the situation to do the emotional heavy lifting.
That is such a crucial distinction for advanced writers to master. Just trusting the facts to be devastating on their own.
Trust the facts.
So how do we practically strip away that tabloid melodrama and replace it with precise, understated language that still carries the weight of a decade-long riff?
Well, by focusing on action and factual contrast rather than emotional labels.
Okay.
So instead of the cliché, her trust crumbled completely in that moment, describe the specific, quiet action Hilary took to protect her family.
Give us an action.
Exactly. You might detail how, in the quiet aftermath of the discovery, she systematically severed every personal and professional tie. That action speaks volumes more than the word crumbled.
Oh, that's so much stronger.
Right? And later, replace a phrase like familiar strangers, which feels a bit manufactured and gossipy.
A little bit, yeah.
Replace that with a thoughtful reflection on how a decade of complete silence starkly contrasts with their earlier days sharing a home and a stage.
That revision completely changes the entire architecture of the piece. I mean, highlighting a decade of complete silence against the backdrop of their former shared stage, it isn't just a stylistic upgrade.
No.
It really respects the listener's intelligence by letting them calculate the loss themselves.
Absolutely. Show, don't tell.
So, looking at the entire scope of this piece, the high-level takeaways form a really clear editorial roadmap.
They really do.
First, the narrative pacing needs to be stretched to allow the reader to anticipate the fracture. Second, the script requires absolute focus when presenting the evidence of the rift. Introducing unresolved variables like the financial records just creates cognitive overload.
Definitely.
And third, the tone must remain grounded, trusting that the raw facts of the sisters' estrangement are devastating enough without needing tabloid amplification.
To translate that into immediate actionable steps for this script, you're going to want to add a transitional sentence highlighting the pressures of Hollywood to slow down the approach to the betrayal.
Right.
Second, either cut the vague financial claims entirely to focus on the romantic cheating, or explicitly connect them to the shared career team so they don't feel like abandoned plot holes.
Make a choice there.
Yes. Finally, comb through the text and replace melodramatic clichés like familiar strangers with understated factual contrasts that highlight the space between their past closeness and their present silence.
We really appreciate the vulnerability it takes to share your drafts and the core foundation you've built here is incredibly compelling. We invite you to implement these structural and tonal revisions and submit your updated work back in for another critique. As you approach this next draft, remember that the most devastating moments in a biography rarely come from the noise of the betrayal itself, but from the unbearable quiet that follows.